Under the dim light of my father's office, his words struck like a hammer. "You'll never be as good as your brother," he sneered, his voice ricocheting off the polished mahogany panels. I stood frozen, my grip on my business proposal so tight that the paper crumpled beneath my fingers. After 10 years of relentless studying, sleepless nights, and dedication, he dismissed me with a single, callous remark. In the corner, my brother Jacob slouched in an armchair, his eyes glued to his phone, deliberately ignoring the moment our father tore my dreams apart. My name is Madeline Brown, and for 30 years, I believed my future was intertwined with Brown Technologies, the company my father had built. From an early age, I was immersed in business. Dinner conversations were filled with market strategies, and weekends were spent observing department heads rather than playing with friends. Jacob, on the other hand, seemed to have no interest in the company, preferring to be anywhere but here. Yet, I was passionate about the industry, every aspect of it. I had excelled in business school, completed internships at top tech firms, and even learned Mandarin to assist in expanding our reach in Asia. But standing before my father that day, none of that mattered. To him, I was just his daughter, someone to marry off, not someone capable of taking on his legacy. "Dad, please, just look at my proposal," I said, my voice trembling but steady. "The market analysis shows." "Enough," he interrupted sharply, waving a hand dismissively. "I've already made my decision. Jacob will take over as COO next month. You should focus on finding a good husband, just like your mother and I want for you." I glanced over at Jacob, who seemed uncomfortable but said nothing. At 27, he had barely scraped through his business courses and preferred perfecting his golf swing over understanding the company. But he had one thing my father valued above all else: he was the son. The familiar sting of being overlooked flared up in my chest, but something inside me shifted. Maybe it was the way my father smiled when he spoke of finding me a husband, or the fact that he didn't even glance at the proposal I had spent months refining. A strange calm settled over me. I knew that no matter how much I accomplished, it would never be enough for him. "You're right," I responded softly, smoothing out the crumpled pages of my proposal. My father looked up, surprised by my sudden acceptance of his words. "I should focus on my future," I continued, placing the proposal on his desk. I turned around and walked out, the door clicking shut behind me. I could hear him laugh softly, probably thinking I'd given up. Little did he know, I wasn't surrendering, I was declaring war. That night, I sat in my apartment, surrounded by piles of market reports and industry analyses I had accumulated over the years. Every scrap of knowledge about Brown Technologies was spread across my dining room table: supplier contracts, distribution networks, customer pain points, information that no one ever thought I'd use against them, but now it felt like ammunition. My phone buzzed, another message from my mother. "Your father means well," she wrote. "He just wants to protect you from the stress." I silenced my phone without responding. My mother had always tried to smooth over my father's harshness with soft excuses, but she had never once confronted him, never questioned his outdated beliefs. The following morning, I walked into Brown Technologies for what would be the last time. As I gathered my belongings from the marketing department, my colleagues avoided making eye contact. In a family business, news spreads quickly. Everyone knew what had happened yesterday, how Walter Brown's ambitious daughter had been put in her place. "I'm sorry, Maddie," Lisa from accounting whispered as she passed by. "We all know you deserved that position." Her pity made the situation worse. How many others had witnessed my endless hard work, only to see me pushed aside because of my gender? I was nearly finished packing when Jacob appeared in the doorway. "Hey," he said, shifting awkwardly. "Dad says you're taking some time off to figure out your priorities." "That's one way to put it," I answered curtly, slamming my laptop bag shut with more force than I intended. "Look, I know you're upset, but maybe it's for the best. Running a company is really stressful and—" "Save it, Jacob," I cut him off. "We both know you don't want this job, but you'll take it because it's easier than standing up to him." He winced at my words, but I didn't feel any sympathy. As I walked out of the building, carrying the small box of my things, I caught a glimpse of myself in the glass doors. Something about my reflection looked different, lighter, as if a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. The only thought running through my mind was that they had no idea what I was truly capable of. They had no clue what I could do. The choice to leave my home country was surprisingly effortless. My entire life had been dedicated to earning a place in my father's world, but now it was time to carve out my own path. Within weeks, I had liquidated my trust fund, the one asset my father couldn't control, signed a lease for office space in Singapore, and booked a one-way flight. My mother's reaction was predictably dramatic. "How could you abandon your family like this?" she cried over the phone. "Your father will never forgive you." I almost laughed at that. The concept of forgiveness suggested I had done something wrong, and for the first time in my life, I was absolutely certain I hadn't. What truly surprised me, however, was the reaction from my grandmother, my father's mother. The night before my departure, she showed up at my apartment, her small frame exuding quiet resolve. "Your grandfather would have been ashamed," she said, "but not in the way I expected. He'd be ashamed of what your father has become." The company, she reminded me, was founded on innovation, not tradition. She handed me a thick envelope containing everything I needed to understand my grandfather's original vision for Brown Technologies, including his personal journals and early business plans. "He always said, 'The future belongs to those brave enough to create it,'" my grandmother told me. Show them what that means. The first few months in Singapore passed in a blur of meetings, coding sessions, and sleepless nights. I quickly pinpointed the greatest flaw in my father's business, his outdated approach to supply chain management. While Brown Technologies still relied on old-school relationships and manual processes, I was creating something groundbreaking, an AI-powered platform designed to predict market demands and optimize inventory in real time. My team expanded rapidly as I hired the brightest minds available, people who saw the potential in revolutionizing an industry stuck in the past. Despite working out of a cramped office with questionable air conditioning, the atmosphere was electric. Every day, we moved one step closer to launching a product that would change the industry. 6 months later, our prototype made a major breakthrough. A prominent tech investor was immediately impressed and recognized the platform's game-changing potential. "This could revolutionize the entire industry," she said during our pitch meeting. "How soon can you scale?" With the right funding in place, we moved quickly. Every weakness I'd noticed in my father's company became a chance for innovation. Where Brown Technologies took weeks to process orders, our system could handle it in minutes. Their manual quality control was replaced by our automated perfection. Their rigid hierarchy became our fluid collaboration. I never disclosed my connection to Brown Technologies. To the outside world, I was just another tech entrepreneur with a bold vision. But late at night, as I reviewed our growing market share reports, I couldn't help but smile. My father was about to learn a costly lesson about underestimating his daughter. 18 months after I left, my company, Novatech Solutions, had become the industry's hot topic. Our platform was transforming how businesses managed their supply chains, and companies were rushing to adopt our technology. Every victory felt like a personal triumph, especially as I read reports about Brown Technologies struggling to keep up with this mysterious new competitor. I was sitting in a board meeting when I first saw the figures that made my heart race. Brown Technologies had lost 30% of their market share in Asia, and their stock was plummeting. My father had always prided himself on his personal touch in business, but in the digital age, that wasn't enough. Clients wanted efficiency, not golf course handshakes. "Another company from Brown's portfolio has switched to our system," my head of sales announced proudly. "That's the 5th one this quarter." The room erupted in applause, but I kept my face neutral. They didn't know they were celebrating my father's downfall, and I intended to keep it that way. Later that evening, as I sat in my office with the Singapore skyline before me, my phone buzzed with a message from Jacob. We hadn't spoken since I left, so I wasn't surprised he was reaching out now. "Dad's losing it," he wrote. "The board is pressuring him to modernize, but he won't listen. He says he won't be bullied by some upstart company." I didn't reply, but a smile tugged at my lips. The irony wasn't lost on me. My father, who had spent years forcing me to conform to his narrow view of what a daughter should be, was now being pushed to change by the very person he had dismissed. The satisfaction was sweeter than I had imagined. The following morning, we received news that sent shockwaves through our office. Brown Technologies had announced plans to acquire promising tech startups in an aggressive expansion effort. My father was trying to buy his way out of trouble, a move straight from his playbook. "They'll be coming for us soon," my CFO warned during our emergency meeting. "We're too much of a threat to ignore." She was right. Within a matter of weeks, Brown Technologies' acquisition team made contact. Their offer was surprisingly generous, far beyond what our company was valued at. My executive team was thrilled, seeing it as recognition of everything we had worked for. "This is an amazing opportunity," my COO insisted. "We'd have the resources to scale globally in no time." But I had waited far too long for this moment to simply give in. "Schedule a meeting," I told them firmly. "I want to handle this personally." My team was taken aback. Normally, I avoided getting involved in acquisition talks, but they didn't question my decision. They had learned to trust my instincts even when they couldn't fully understand them. What they didn't realize was that I was finally ready to show them who I truly was. Later that night, I stood on my balcony, watching the city lights flicker like distant stars. I thought back to the day I had left my father's office, the countless nights filled with self-doubt and wondering if I was making the wrong choice. Now, my so-called mistake was worth millions. And my father, the one who never believed in me, was about to discover exactly what he had lost. My phone buzzed once more. Another message from Jacob. "Dad's planning to fly to Singapore himself for the acquisition meeting. Says he needs to handle this one personally." Perfect, I thought, setting my phone down. It was time for the long-awaited family reunion. The day of the meeting arrived, and with it, a tension that filled the air of our modern office, so different from my father's old-fashioned, wood-paneled domain. I had chosen the largest conference room, with its towering windows offering a stunning view of the city. My team was ready, each of them with tablets in hand, calm and professional. When my father entered, flanked by his advisors, I allowed myself a moment to savor the scene before he noticed me. He looked older, worn from the strain of managing a failing company. His eyes scanned the room with the arrogant confidence I knew all too well, until they landed on me, seated at the head of the table. The color drained from his face. "Madeline?" "Hello, Dad," I responded, my voice steady. "Please, have a seat. We have a lot to talk about." His advisors exchanged puzzled looks, and my father stood frozen in the doorway. I could see him struggling to process what was unfolding before him, his daughter, the one he had dismissed, now sitting in the position of power. "What is this?" he demanded, his shock quickly turning to anger. "What kind of game are you playing?" "No game," I replied, gesturing to the presentation screen behind me. "Just business. Novatech Solutions is my company. I founded it, built it, and grew it into the market leader you're now scrambling to acquire." The silence that followed was almost unbearable. My team watched wide-eyed, as many of them were hearing for the first time about my connection to Brown Technologies. My father's advisors were whispering frantically, no doubt realizing the weight of this revelation. "Impossible," my father sputtered. "You couldn't have. This isn't." "What's impossible?" I asked, pulling up our company's growth charts. "That I created a solution that's changing the industry? Or that I did it without your help?" One of his advisors cleared his throat, attempting to regain control. "Ms. Brown, regardless of your personal connection, we're here to discuss a serious business proposition." Of course, I smiled. "Let's talk about how my company now holds 40% of the market share in Asia. Or perhaps you'd like to discuss how our AI-driven platform has made your entire business model obsolete." My father finally found his voice. "You did this to destroy me? Your own father." "No," I said, my smile fading. "I did this because you taught me that as a woman, I couldn't run a company. So I built one instead. One that's better than yours in every way." His face turned crimson. "Name your price," he growled. "Everyone has one." I stood up, adjusting my blazer. "That's where you're wrong, Dad. This isn't about money. It never was. This company is my legacy. The one you refused to let me build with you." I walked around the table, stopping directly in front of him. "Your offer is declined." "You can't do this," he shouted. But his voice lacked its usual force. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in his eyes. I already have, I said, firmly. Meeting adjourned. As my father stormed out of the conference room, his face a mixture of rage and humiliation, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. His advisors rushed after him, abandoning their presentation folders and sleek black binders, the same ones embossed with the Brown Technologies logo I had grown up seeing everywhere. That was unexpected, my CFO said, breaking the stunned silence that had settled over the room. You're Walter Brown's daughter. I turned to face my team, the people who had believed in my vision, unaware of the full story. I am Walter Brown's daughter. But more significantly, I am the CEO who will lead this company onto the global stage. The following weeks were a blur of activity. News about my identity spread to the media, and before long, every major business publication was eager to cover the story. The headline, "Tech Heiress Disrupts Family Empire," became the talk of the month. My phone was overwhelmed with messages from all directions. Former colleagues, family friends, and even my mother all reached out, curious to understand how the daughter who had always followed the rules had suddenly become a competitor in the business world. The only message I truly paid attention to was Jacob's. It read, "I always knew you were better at this than me. For what it's worth, I'm sorry I didn't say it sooner." One afternoon, my grandmother invited me to tea at her favorite spot, the same place where she used to take me as a child. Her eyes gleamed with pride as she read the latest article on Novatech's accomplishments. "Your grandfather would have been so proud," she said, setting her teacup down. "He built this company with the belief that innovation mattered more than tradition. Your father lost sight of that, but you didn't." Meanwhile, market analysts were predicting that Brown Technologies would have to undergo substantial restructuring to stay afloat. They speculated that my father was under immense pressure to step down. The board was pushing for younger leadership, someone capable of modernizing the company before it was too late. But I had moved on from my father's company. Novatech was expanding into Europe, and we were developing groundbreaking new features that would revolutionize the industry even further. My team was not just motivated, they were valued, regardless of their background or identity. One evening, while I was in my office reviewing plans for our expansion, my assistant called in. "Your father is here to see you." I considered sending him away but ultimately decided against it. Let him see what his daughter had built without his help. He walked in slowly, looking uncertain in this modern, unfamiliar space, so different from his traditional office. "Madeline," he said, his voice lacking the usual confidence he always carried. "We need to talk." I stood up but didn't offer him a seat. "About what?" I asked. "Business or family?" "Both," he replied. "The board wants you to come back and lead Brown Technologies' digital transformation." I let out a laugh and the sound echoed off the glass walls. "You still don't get it, do you? I didn't build this company to prove anything to you. I built it because I could, because I'm good at what I do. I don't need your approval anymore." He recoiled at my words, finally realizing what his actions had cost him, not just market share or the company's value, but a daughter who had once been willing to give him everything. "You should leave," I said quietly. "I have a meeting with European investors in the morning." As he turned to leave, I walked to the window, gazing out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, a young woman was likely being told that she couldn't achieve something simply because of who she was. I hoped she would prove them wrong too. The story of my quick rise to success became legendary within the tech world. But what the headlines didn't capture were the quiet victories that followed. Brown Technologies stock continued to plummet as more and more clients switched to our platform. Eventually, the board took action and forced my father into an early retirement, an embarrassment he couldn't bear. He withdrew to his mansion, unable to face an industry that had once revered him. Meanwhile, Novatech continued to soar. Our expansion into Europe exceeded all expectations, and our development team introduced innovations faster than our competitors could keep up. The atmosphere in our office was electric, brimming with creativity and collaboration, exactly the environment I had always dreamed of building at Brown Technologies. One day, my grandmother visited our headquarters in Singapore. As I gave her a tour, introducing her to the team and showcasing our latest developments, she squeezed my hand. I have something for you, she said, pulling out an old leather journal. Your grandfather's notes from when he first started the company. She flipped open the journal to a specific page and pointed to a highlighted passage. A true legacy isn't inherited. It's earned through vision and determination. She explained, he wrote that the day your father joined the company. I think he knew, even back then, that true innovation requires more than just a birthright. Her words struck me deeply. All those years, I had struggled for a place in my father's legacy, never realizing I needed to create my own. Now, standing in the heart of my own company, surrounded by people who respected me for my skills rather than my family name, I finally understood what real success felt like. The industry that had once dismissed me as Walter Brown's daughter now recognized me as Madeline Brown, the innovator who transformed supply chain management. I had earned that recognition every step of the way. 6 months after my father's retirement, Novatech hosted a global technology summit in Singapore. Industry leaders from all corners of the world came together to discuss the future of supply chain management. I had the honor of delivering the keynote speech, with my grandmother proudly sitting in the front row. I stood before the crowded auditorium and told them, innovation isn't about following the past, it's about the bravery to question it. The irony was evident to everyone when I unveiled our latest achievement, an advancement that would render companies like Brown Technologies outdated. After the event, Jacob came up to me during the reception. He seemed different, more humble and sincere. I sold my shares in Dad's company, he admitted. I've started a small sports coaching business now. For the first time in my life, I'm genuinely happy. I smiled, realizing that we had both found our freedom in our own ways. He had broken free from our father's expectations by forging his own path, while I had triumphed over them by surpassing them. My mother still occasionally sends messages, trying to mend the rift between my father and me. But she doesn't realize that some bridges are better left unrepaired. I've made my peace with that, just as I've come to terms with my own journey. Nowadays, when young entrepreneurs reach out to me for advice, I share my real secret to success. Don't let anyone else dictate your value. The greatest form of revenge isn't about proving others wrong, it's about proving yourself right. As for my father, the last I heard, he spends his days in his study, surrounded by the same mahogany panels that once bore witness to his biggest mistake, underestimating his daughter. Sometimes, the most costly lessons are the ones we learn when it's too late.